Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our third episode. It's good to see you again, Adam.
Pleasure's all mine, Karen. What's today's episode all about then?
Today's episode is all about some basic matters. We'll start off with work regulations and then move on to the health and welfare system in Italy.
Let's begin by looking at the rights and opportunities present in this country.
Yes, our arrival and stay in Italy isn't just made up of rules and obligations. All those things we spoke about in our last episode regarding visa and residence permit applications and the inherent legislation.
Yes, we notice how the chance of getting a residence permit is strictly linked to the possibility of working in many cases.
Indeed, that's why we're starting this episode by carrying on from where we left off regarding the laws that regulate the world of work in Italy.
Firstly, it must be said that under the Constitution, work is first and foremost a right, because only by working can you live freely and with dignity. However, it is also a duty, as the act of working involves you in community life and contributes to the country's progress. This is why the state has to foster conditions that make the right to work really effective. Furthermore, each person is free to choose the job or profession they wish to carry out within their abilities. However, you should remember that the minimum age to work legally in Italy is 15 years old.
Yes, it's important to protect children. What about the rights of workers in general?
The Constitution always says that every worker is entitled to a fair wage, which means wages in proportion to the quantity and quality of their work, sufficient to ensure them and their family a free and dignified life. And all workers have the right to enjoy a weekly rest and paid leave.
Which is fair, but I'd like to ask you to try to explain some of the more practical issues. We've been granted our work residence permit, whether employed or self-employed, and we're about to start working in Italy. What should we know about working in Italy?
I would start off by examining employed work, as the two cases are quite different.
Especially since most foreign workers have a contract with an employer.
That's true. The first thing to remember is that your salary, whatever the job, is paid once a month via your payslip, as agreed in your contract signed with your employer. Here's an example of a payslip. Don't panic, I just wanted to show you what a payslip looks like.
For the time being, we just need to know a few things. What's included in a payslip?
Your payslip includes your salary, by which I mean the money you receive every month. A part of the total amount paid by the employer is taxed and used to maintain our common services such as schooling, health, street maintenance and other services.
Does the payment of these taxes by a foreign worker guarantee their rights?
Absolutely. These taxes are actually necessary to accrue pension rights, sickness rights, parental leave, and an unemployment allowance. We normally call these contributions in Italy, and they are automatically paid to INPS by your employer, who withholds them from your payslip.
Let's take a look at these rights.
These rights are inalienable for any employee, but only if there is a contract signed with the employer. Knowing how complicated legislation is regarding work and benefits, I advise everyone to make use of the specialist offices that can help you. Properly handle your taxes and benefits with the Italian public authority, INPS, INAIL, the Inland Revenue called the Agenzia delle Entrate in Italy, and so on. The basic rights of workers. A worker with a contract has in Italy the right to be paid if they get sick by showing a medical certificate, paid days off during the year and at least one day off every week, parental leave for either the father or mother to stay at home with their child whilst receiving a part of their salary. Pregnant women are obliged to stay at home from work for 2 months before and 3 months after the birth of their child, whilst continuing to receive a part of their salary. In certain circumstances, you can receive unemployment benefits.
Could you quickly explain what these acronyms stand for?
Of course. INPS is the Italian Institute for Social Benefits, the main benefits body in Italy, which every employee in the private sector must sign up for, as well as some public sector workers and all those self-employed. This is where most foreign workers make their contributions. INAIL is the National Institute for Work-Related Accidents, the institution that handles workers' rights regarding accidents at work.
Forgive me for interrupting you, but is insurance necessary for every employed job category?
Yes, the insurance is compulsory in Italy, and you sign up for it the minute you sign a work contract. Every job involves the annual payment of an additional contribution by your employer, the amount of which depends on the level of risk inherent to your job. These contributions are paid to INAIL, which is where you have to go for anything concerning work-related accidents.
And what's the inland revenue?
The inland revenue is the public body that deals with the assessment, management and resolution of disputes relating to tax payments in Italy. For the time being, it's enough to know that it's the body where we pay our taxes. And these taxes have to be paid, seeing as they go towards paying for the schools and hospitals.
I agree. But with regard to employed work, taxes and contributions are paid by your employer directly. You were saying that your contributions are paid to INPS by your employer, which allow you certain rights.
Yes, in particular, these contributions go towards your pension funds.
What do you mean by pension in Italy?
A pension is the money that you will receive when you finish working due to old age. If you have worked sufficiently in Italy, you can receive your pension money even if you return to your home country, but only when you have reached the Italian pensionable age, which is normally after 30 years of contributions and is a registered age of over 60. What we know as social benefits in Italy isn't only limited to your retirement pension.
Could you tell us something about Social Security in Italy?
Of course, but the payment of social security contributions towards your pension or against work-related accidents are a very complex matter, so I don't want to go into it too much, otherwise it'll just confuse our viewers.
Right, but we don't want to find out the hard way, do we? We'll have to face it at some point.
Yeah, you're right, especially since we should all be very careful about this so as to avoid any serious debt towards your personal property or your job, or injury to basic rights such as maternity leave or pension benefits. I urge everyone to make use of the specialized offices of trade unions and welfare agencies, especially with regard to employees.
In this case, it seems particularly important to correctly handle your tax and social security payments with the Italian public authorities that we mentioned earlier. INAIL, INPS, Inland Revenue, etc. Are there any cases where an employee doesn't pay taxes and contributions in the way we saw?
Yes, because the contributions are paid monthly by your employer only if you have worked continuously for them over a calendar year. In this case, the taxes are considered fully paid, so you don't have to make an income tax declaration.
Let's explain exactly what we mean by an income tax declaration.
An income tax declaration, also known as a tax return, is the way by which an employee or taxpayer declares how much they have earned over the course of the previous year and pay the respective tax.
Oh, so that's why an employee shouldn't fill out a tax return. They've already made their tax contributions via their salary.
Exactly, provided they don't have any other sources of income or revenue. In such a case, you need to prepare your tax return in the same way that workers who have worked for more than one employer in the preceding calendar year.
Thanks, Adam. That all seems pretty clear. You were saying that a tax return, if necessary, provides access to the rights we spoke about earlier. I have a question though. Do these contributions always happen in the presence of a work contract?
Yes, in the vast majority of cases of paid work, you are paid by payslip, therefore by a payment required by the contract you signed. Some categories, however, have specific procedures, such as a cleaning lady.
We'll look into that a bit since it's one of the most popular professions for foreign nationals, especially for women. I just wanted to reiterate the point about your contract, which I think is important.
Actually, it's tremendously important, and it's the reason why illegal or irregular foreign nationals are in a high-risk group. Without a residence permit, they can't get a work contract and thus gain access to the rights provided by their place of work.
Let's go back to the tax return. We said that if you work continuously for a single employer and you have no other source of income, you needn't fill out a tax return.
Yes, you are not required to fill out a tax return, but you are entitled to a certificate, a CUD, that contains all your income paid to you by your employer over the work period from February to March of the following year.
Therefore, if I have worked in 2010, I will have to ask my employer for my CUD income certificate by February or March of 2011.
Exactly. This document certifies all the income you received in the previous calendar year, including the relevant taxation paid. Your tax return must be completed should you wish to get tax savings or recover taxes paid in excess. Through your tax return, you can get tax relief, for example, when you have dependent family members, spouses, children, etc., if your medical expenses exceed a certain amount, if you take a mortgage on the purchase of your main home, if you pay rent on your home under certain conditions, if you are an employee who is moving or has moved home in the last 3 years that is at least 100 kilometers from your last home and is in any event outside the region of your last home, for taxes, university taxes that is, if you support the cost of sporting activities for your children, if you have incurred documented costs on the renovation of your home.
Are there cases when you should fill out your tax return anyway, even when you have only one job?
Well, it only makes sense if you have to make some tax savings or recover surplus taxes paid, which are not included in your annual payslip. In this sense, as we'll see in the next picture, there are a number of rights which allow you to obtain tax rebates and tax reductions.
How can you tell if you should make a tax return or not?
Well, my advice is always to consult a welfare association, which can help you understand what is best for you. It is a very complex issue that can't always be settled for an individual worker who's been in Italy for just 1 year.
I'm with you on this point, especially for those who have to fill out a tax return. Could you explain once more when you have to make a tax return?
A tax return becomes an obligation if you have worked for several employers in the same year, if you have a VAT number, a partita IVA, even if you are not practicing your business, and if you work as a domestic help for a private family.
The support of a welfare agency is essential in this case. When do you have to declare your tax return?
For this job category, your tax return is usually done with a 730 form, upon which you should record all your salaries together with additional and eventual sources of income received in the previous year.
When do I have to prepare my 730 tax return form?
The period of compilation and delivery is from April to May of the following year. You need to be very careful since errors or omissions may lead to serious consequences.
It's best to be clear about that now.
First of all, the absence of a tax return carries with it high penalties. You might be tempted not to declare your income from all of your employers. I recommend that you don't ever fall prey to that temptation because you can't run from the inland revenue. You might also have to pay extra taxes to the Italian state as a settlement for those already paid the previous year with your payslip. In this case, the Italian system requires tax deposit for the current corresponding to a percentage of those paid in the previous year.
As a guarantee that you'll pay?
Yes, something like that.
What about the Social Security contributions?
As for Social Security contributions, you should check for the payments made at the Italian Social Security offices, as well as checking the effectiveness of your employer's performance and for the chance to weigh up integrating other supplementary funds to your pension. This applies to all categories of paid employment.
How interesting. Remember that you can also get the information on how to bring together all of your pension contributions from other countries where you have lived or worked.
Good job, Karen. You're almost our in-house expert. I would just add that if you have lost your job during the previous year, you'll have to complete your tax return in a different way using the tax form that self-employed workers use.
That's all regarding taxes and contributions for employed workers. Let's move on to self-employed workers.
Okay. First of all, you need to remember that a business has fixed costs even if they don't produce any income. These are the minimum pension and social security costs related to the very existence of your company.
How much are these fixed costs?
Well, craft and trade businesses can cost from between 3,000 to 4,000 euros per year. These costs accrue with registration in a company registry of the Chamber of Commerce, the CCIAA. This is the case even if you are not doing any business or receiving any income.
Remember that we spoke about the Chamber of Commerce in the last episode. It's a public body that brings together all the commercial enterprises of the province where your company is.
That's right. You need to be careful. Non-payment of any of these charges means that INAIL and INPS will not grant you your certificate of regular contributions known as DIRC.
DIRC?
Yes, your social security documents that are necessary should you wish to work in the crafts field, necessary to receive work or service contracts, and recently for the issue and maintenance of licenses and commercial authorizations.
Basically, most of the work that foreign citizens do here.
That's right. That's why it's a good idea to remember that the procedures regarding non-payment of these taxes and their recovery have recently been made faster. After just a few months following several reminder letters, polite warnings and payment forms, a debt collection service will be able to detain your vehicle, a clamping or administrative detention system, for the seizure of movable property and a seizure of estate property, and a claim on any mortgages that belong to you.
Nothing to laugh about then. Are there any other fixed costs for the self-employed?
Yes, there are costs unrelated to taxes, such as your annual administrative costs regarding accounting, tax assistance, and the electronic management of all communications, and the compliance with those offices in charge. Luckily, many of these procedures have been computerized.
Via the internet here too?
Yes, many procedures regarding self-employment have been computerized. Nowadays, a businessman can fulfill many of their obligations using digitally signed communications using reliable professionals. This includes registrations, the changes or closures of companies with offices such as CCIAA, IMPS, INAIL, the registry boards, or the Inland Revenue.
Very good. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on to the way you present your tax return?
Well, there is, in fact. We've forgotten some other fixed costs relating to safety measures in the workplace in compliance with EU directives brought into Italian law. Italy has complex and highly detailed rules on safety in the workplace and working conditions. You should consult a professional or a consultant so as not to risk any legal violations and heavy penalties, financial and criminal. This makes a significant effect on the costs of your business, but they're impossible to ignore.
So we have three types of costs for independent businesses: fixed costs, administrative costs, and safety standards compliance costs. When should you declare your income as a self-employed worker?
Self-employed workers need to declare their income via a UNICO form, Unified Compensatory Form, during the period of May to June of the following year you are declaring for. This form can also be used in some special cases which I mentioned in the graphics.
Therefore, I have to make my tax return in May-June for the income earned in 2010.
Exactly. Remember that filling in the UNICO form is very difficult as it involves differences depending on the circumstances and the business taking place. If you need any other extra information, you can visit the Inland Revenue website, http://wps.gov.it/portal/enterate/home.
Okay, Adam, now that we've explained the procedure for tax and contribution payments, we can move on to the second part of this episode on health and social welfare in Italy.
This topic is very important for foreign nationals. The Italian Constitution gives several inalienable rights that we need to remember.
Which article are you referring to in particular?
To Article 32, which says that the Republic protects health as a basic right of the individual and of the collective interest, guaranteeing free medical care to the needy. This right to health is guaranteed by the National Health Service.
Please explain what role is assigned to this service by Italian law.
The Health Service guarantees everybody the appropriate and necessary services for their protection, cure, and health recovery, ensuring a uniformity of access to benefits and services based on the three basic principles: universal care, equal access, and solidarity.
Universality, equal access to care, and solidarity. However, the health service is a complex system, so I ask all of you to look further into all the information that can be useful to new Italian citizens.
That's why I'm here, after all. Firstly, it should be stressed that the health service is not a single administration, but a set of institutions and bodies that work together to fulfill the objectives set by the Constitution. I've included everything in the next image.
Wow, it really has a lot of different branches.
Yes, it does, although in principle, foreign nationals should only have to deal with some positions in specific places, such as the local health authority, hospitals, general practitioners, GPs, and pediatricians, PLS, the doctor who takes care of children under 14, and so on.
We'll specify the different characteristics of each of these terms as we move on step by step through this episode. Let's start from the beginning. We know that foreigners present here legally and working are required to register along with their families for the National Health Service. How do you go about registering with it?
Well, to join the National Health Service, a foreign national has to go to the local health authority, ASLA, in your local area. There they will issue a health card which must be shown to every health facility when asking for medical treatment.
Is ASLA subdivided at a provincial level?
Not exactly. The Italian territory is divided into health districts, each of which is controlled by an ASLA. In highly populated provinces there are more than one ASLA, each of which deals with a particular part of the territory.
Which documents should I bring with me to complete my registration?
Registration with the National Health Service. To join the NHS, non-EU citizens must go to the local health authority, ASLA, where you live, and bring with you personal details of self-certification, a certificate of your registered residency or proof of your application for residency or permanent stay issued by the council where you live, a work contract should you be an employee, registration with the Chamber of Commerce should you be self-employed, your registration at a job centre should you be made redundant, one of the following forms, E106, E109, E120 and E121, should they have been issued in your home country. Your tax code, a payment receipt by bank transfer made out to the Regional Health Fund for the sum due. Enrolment in the NHS is free if the foreign national is unemployed with a residence permit and registered as unemployed, has taken asylum with a certificate demonstrating their status as a refugee or asylum seeker, is married and is dependent on an Italian citizen, is a minor with a parent residing in Italy belonging to one of the categories listed above. In the case of a minor, the parent or legal guardian can arrange registration by submitting the appropriate documents.
Speaking of payment, how much does the registration cost?
For foreigners with a resident permit for longer than 3 months who are not working and not by right covered by the NHS, the full cost of voluntary registration in the NHS is €387.34, payable at the post office that will issue a receipt. You should pay this contribution annually, which extends to your dependent family members and is valid for 1 calendar year, ending in December. However, there are certain circumstances that will reduce or even cancel this expense.
This is very important since we're talking about a lot of money. Can you remind us of these circumstances, please?
First of all, anyone who pays taxes through a tax return do not have to pay the charges, since your taxation fee also includes one for the NHS. A copy of your tax statements, RF, which you'll find in your tax return, is all you should need to present to your ASLA office, other than the documents they request. Secondly, foreign nationals who reside here for study purposes have to pay a smaller amount, equal to €149.77. And finally, as we'll soon see, NHS registration is free in these cases. If the foreign national is unemployed with a residence permit and registered with the employment agency, if he is a refugee with a certificate attesting to their legitimate refugee status and request for asylum, if they are married to or provided for by an Italian citizen, if they are under 18 with parents residing in Italy and belonging to one of the categories I just listed.
Okay, one last thing. What do these certificates marked with the letter E mean?
They refer to the forms provided by agreements between Italy and other foreign states. They are designed to offer you health benefits through your home country's health service. However, most new Italians come from countries without this agreement.
I see. Are there some categories of foreign nationals with a residence permit who don't have to join the National Health Service?
Yes, the obligation does not arise for those here in Italy with a business residence permit.
For business. Okay, how long does this registration last?
Registration lasts for as long as the residence permit does and is extended to all dependent family members holding regular permits of stay. The registration ceases when the permit is no longer renewed, when it has been revoked or cancelled, or when the holder has been deported.
What if the measures have been disputed or the permit is awaiting renewal?
In both cases, you can still benefit from registration. In cases of dispute, you need to request a renewal showing the documentation that proves your objection to the withdrawal in a legal court. As for the expiry of your residence permit during the year, the health card will be issued until the expiry date of the permit. A further card may be issued with the renewal of your permit, which will last until the 31st of December, again taking advantage of the annual fee paid.
That's pretty clear, Adam. What should I do once I've registered with the National Health Service?
At this point, you have to choose your general practitioner, MMG, sometimes called your family doctor, consulting the lists of doctors available in your ASLA. In each ASLA, there is an office where you can refer to the choice of your doctor.
Can you change this choice once you've made it?
Of course, you can always change your choice by going to the same office. For the cure of children from their birth until 14 years of age, you will need to choose a specific doctor known as a pediatrician.
Okay, what happens when a minor reaches 14 years of age?
At the age of 14, ASLA informs the child's family that they have to choose a GP for their child. However, in some cases, the child's family should contact the office beforehand to ask the same office not to withdraw their pediatrician until the child reaches 16 years of age.
However, one issue remains. What happens if a foreigner who isn't registered with the NHS requires the use of the health services, such as when they are illegally present here?
Well, the rules are quite clear here, and they were confirmed in a recent ruling in 2009, precisely because the health services in Italy are considered inalienable rights of the individual, and it is forbidden for health staff to report the presence of an illegal immigrant asking for health care from the authority. Therefore, even if your position is not legal, you can access health care without fear of being reported or deported.
And that's really good news. Here we come to the running of the health service from a user's point of view. Which services should we point out?
Well, in the first place, we need to distinguish between the type of services you might need. These cases are emergencies, accidents, illnesses, or a standard route such as pregnancy. Let's
take a look at them one by one. Who should we see regarding accidents or emergencies?
In case of emergencies, the place to go to is the emergency room, which you'll find in a hospital. Here you receive the first line of treatment for any urgent cases and emergencies such as traumas, heart attacks, etc. And it provides access to urgent hospitalization.
So in any cases of accidents or the like, the first thing you do is seek treatment at a hospital?
Exactly. This obviously applies to general and urgent cases, whereas the general practitioner or pediatrician deals with standard health problems. You will need to book an appointment at their surgery.
Am I right in thinking that the accident and emergency department at the hospitals is always open, and the GPs and pediatricians have their own schedule?
Yes. Partly because their work isn't about emergencies, but rather less serious cases, and partly because the care they provide may be performed outside of hospitals, such as vaccinations. According to law, doctors and pediatricians have to carry out their work 5 days a week from Monday to Friday, between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's up to them to choose their working hours, but they should be proportional to the number of patients they have so, as to ensure adequate care to their patients.
Well, that all seems clear enough. As for emergencies or the most serious cases, we should go to the A&E department at a hospital or be carried there by ambulance. In all other situations, you should visit your GP or pediatrician.
That's correct. However, there are some special cases and some specific services dedicated to them that we should discuss further.
Sure. It's particularly important to address two specific cases, that of pregnancy and that of disability. Let's begin with the services dedicated to women with particular regard to pregnancy.
Well, most of these services are done through family counseling centers, where there is a counter dedicated to foreign women and their children.
What is a family counseling center?
Family counseling centers are social and health clinics, whether public or contracted private health clinics, designed to meet the various needs of families, women, couples, children, and adolescents.
How can they help foreign women in Italy?
Foreign women, including those without a residence permit, can find help and advice for herself and her children by going to the Office for Foreign Women and their children at a family counseling clinic. Here, women are helped with pregnancy, abortion, menopause, contraception, and infertility. They offer advice from a midwife and a visit to a gynecologist. You can see all these services listed here in this chart.
It's best we should get to know about this place as soon as we arrive in Italy.
I would underline the fact that each of these services is absolutely free, and I repeat, can even be accessed without a residence permit for anything regarding medical care and health services.
Among these services listed, we have yet to mention the issues relating to foster care and adoption.
Yes, because in such cases you need a document that you don't have.
Let's be more specific. If you don't mind, especially since this issue interests me personally, what's the procedure to request a doctor's visit for an observation or a checkup?
In general, to have an outpatient appointment with a midwife, gynecologist or family counselling clinic, you should book an appointment and go along with your health card. No medical prescription is necessary. In some regions, there are some areas dedicated to foreign or young women where you get immediate access without needing an appointment.
How much does this service cost?
The doctor's appointment is paid for by a ticket. This is the name given for the payment of any medical service in Italy, including hospital care. The cost depends on the service. However, it is free for midwife visits for women under 18, using the youth area, and for pregnant women.
Perfect, Adam. Don't forget that gynecological visits are free for people using the youth area.
Yes, that's true.
Good. I'd like to add one more thing. Very often, the problem for foreign women isn't to do with the ease of access to these services, but rather not having any confidence in them, since they are often unaccustomed to such procedures in Italy.
Yes, I quite understand what you mean. However, women who use the foreign women area have the help of a cultural mediator to help make things easier. Where there isn't this area, foreign women can access this service by making an appointment at their family counselling clinic or the pediatrics community at their ASLA.
Thanks a lot, Adam. As we will see, the counseling service is exactly the same for children.
Yes, it is. Children are cared for with pediatric visits, health checkups, vaccinations and checkups for tuberculosis and infectious diseases.
Let's explain the point regarding vaccinations.
Vaccinations are given free of charge for all children within the region at the family counselling clinic. We can see those normally given in the next chart.
Are these vaccinations paid for with a ticket?
No. All of these vaccinations are included in a document called the Regional Calendar of Vaccinations. They are obligatory and free of charge.
What about disability services?
Yes, I should begin by saying that assistance to people with disabilities is based on the integration of the health services, social services, and the involvement of family, members, volunteers, and associations. It's a care system network that aims to promote personal autonomy in schooling, social life, and work.
Work too? Great. What's the first step then?
The first step is applying for a certificate that recognizes your disability. This document certifies your condition. You should apply for it at your local ASLA. The procedures are handled at a regional level and vary slightly depending on your area in Italy. You should present the certificate from your doctor that attests to your disability along with your personal documents.
As we can see in this chart, the services for minors and adults are different.
Yes, children with disabilities can go to their family pediatrician, their community pediatrician, or a Centre for Child and Adolescent Neuropsychiatry at their local hospital, as well as a local social worker to whom adults can consult as well.
Adults refer to their GP. Okay, that's all pretty clear. What rights are associated with disabilities?
Two are important to remember. First of all, home care. People with severe disabilities who are not self-sufficient, both adults and children, can get home care on the basis of a personalized care plan.
Can you receive all types of health services at home?
Yes, home care consists of various treatments such as medical, nursing and rehabilitation. Qualified staff will visit your home where they will carry out your treatment. However, you'll need some good family support.
Yes, when you are not self-sufficient or at risk, the presence of relatives is fundamental.
Exactly. That's why your second right was established, which states that family members or those who assist a person who is not self-sufficient with severe disabilities or at risk can receive a financial contribution known as a carer's allowance.
What's that about?
It's a financial assistance provided by the region according to your family's income and how much the disabled person is not self-sufficient. However, we should remember that not all regions currently provide this financial assistance.
Let's hope that things improve. Well, I think that concludes the part regarding special health services. Would you like to add anything regarding healthcare, Adam?
Actually, yes. We haven't yet spoken about prevention programs provided by the NHS.
That's right. Can you tell us something about them?
They are checkups for serious illnesses. This usually means screening for the prevention and early detection of cancer of the cervix, breast and colon rectum.
How can you access these programs?
If you are a resident or domiciled in Italy, you will directly receive an invitation letter at home, which is sent to both Italians and foreigners. This letter explains how to take part in various programs and gives you a free appointment.
There's always a chance you might not get your letter should you move, for instance. Who should you contact if this happens?
Well, simply go to your ASL local health centre. In any case, your invitation letter contains a free call number for any request, including changing the date of the appointment that the letter proposes.
We said that these tests are completely free. The only problem, as we have already seen, can come from a linguistic or cultural distance between the patients and medical staff.
This is why we have a free cultural mediation service supplied by the region to ease access to services and communication between all parties.
Is the presence of a cultural mediator required by law?
Well, not by Italian state law, but by regional law, which is in charge of some health legislation. Where possible, their role is to take into account the cultures of their home countries and allow full understanding of patient information.
At this point, Adam, I'd like to look into social welfare.
That's a good idea, Karen. This way, today's episode can complete the circle regarding workers' rights and health and social welfare rights for new Italian citizens.
Exactly. Let's begin by answering exactly what we mean by social welfare.
Well, in general, it refers to all of the economic and social services that the state provides its citizens for getting through needy and difficult situations. This right is provided for by the Italian Constitution as shown in this image. Social welfare, constitutional extracts. Article 3, it is the responsibility of the Republic to remove those obstacles of an economic or social nature which limit the freedom and equality of citizens, prevent the full development of a human being and the effective participation of all workers in the political, economical and social organization of the country. Article 38, every citizen unable to work and without the means to live has a right to welfare support. Workers have the right to be provided for and guaranteed adequate means for their needs in case of accident, sickness, disability and old age, and involuntary unemployment. Disabled and handicapped people have the right to education and vocational training. The duties laid down in this article shall ensure organizations and institutions established or supported by the state. Such private assistance, it is under its own control.
Very interesting. How does the Italian state guarantee these rights?
The Italian Republic provides a series of laws to help people remove or overcome situations of need and difficulty that may occur in life. These are called social services.
What type of social services are offered?
Well, let's say that we can divide these services into two groups. On one side are services, on the other is financial aid.
I think we've already mentioned social welfare services in our previous episodes. Let's take a closer look now.
Well, the group of services, which may be free or not, is a coordinated set of people and instruments whose purpose is to improve the living situation of people using the service. The group of aid brings together all the forms of financial support given directly to the person in difficulty based on an individualized plan for improving their living conditions.
Okay, so there are two types of services then. Which institutions make sure that these social welfare services are met?
There are mainly three: the state, the regions and the local councils, which act on different levels.
Let's start from the top then. What role does the state have here in social welfare?
Well, the state carries out two main tasks. On one hand, it ensures a degree of uniformity of the social services in all its territories, so as to avoid any unequal treatment among different parts of Italy. On the other hand, it directly takes care of some services through INPS, the institution we spoke about regarding pensions, and which also takes care of invalids, mothers and their children, and the elderly who are below the poverty line.
Oh yes, I remember that. Can all foreigners use the services provided by INPS?
Well, that's the point I'd like to make. Should you not require urgent medical care, any access to the services provided by INPS requires a long-term residence permit, which we spoke about in our last episode.
Right. Yes, your card of stay is granted after 5 years, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So we should emphasize, actually, how at a state level, only those who possess a card of stay have the same rights regarding social welfare as the rest of the Italian population.
Excluding all the health services we spoke about before, accidents, pregnancy, and so on.
Yes, absolutely necessary health services are provided to everyone, including those without a residence permit. However, the practical implementation of many social services is not up to the state, but to the councils that have less stringent access requirements.
Now we're getting to it. You told me that the regions have an important role too, didn't you? Could you explain what you mean by that?
Of course, the role of the regions is to govern and coordinate social services carried out on their territory. Through regional laws, they decide who should receive social services and then implement them through a council act.
By a council act. Okay, councils that deal with the practical implementation of the services. How does this happen?
Well, we'll need to distinguish them first. Some services are aimed at everyone and others are dedicated solely to residents of that municipality.
Another good reason why you should request your residency the moment you arrive in Italy, as we said in the last episode.
Indeed. Even though there are some emergency services, it is important nonetheless to go to your local registry office as soon as you arrive in Italy and request residency.
You mentioned emergency services. Can you explain which cases you're referring to?
I'm referring to the situation where you have to guarantee the minimal living conditions and respect basic human rights. For example, ensuring a decent meal, offering a sheltered place to stay, allowing the minimum state of cleanliness and personal hygiene, directing those needing help towards the actual possibilities of the territory involved in basic care.
However, you'll need to request your residency permit if you wish to access more organized services. Can we mention some examples of the services we can request?
Absolutely, just as you see here in this chart. You can ask for social assistance from your local council for the following. 1, the urgent need of a home for an individual or family. 2, the need for protection against a violent or exploitative situation. 3, the need for financial aid to pay for a child's schooling. 4, the need of financial help to pay the rent, electricity, water or gas in the house. 5, the need of help in improving their Italian language. 6, the need of help to feel well inside your family and with your children. 7, the need of help trying to find work. And 8, the need for help to feeling more empowered and less isolated.
So these services cover a large part of the needs of foreign citizens in difficulty. Let's explain the procedure then. Once you have your residency permit, how do you go about getting access to social welfare assistance?
Well, first of all, you should know that every council or group of councils have a counter dedicated to social care, or a public relations office, URP, where you can go for any information about current services, which often vary depending on where you live. You can also have a meeting with practitioners and professionals to access such services and access the rankings list.
Rankings list?
Yes, these services are aimed at all residents potentially, but seeing as how our economic resources are often limited, the councils are forced to make a selection and a ranking. Obviously, the access criteria are the same for both Italians and foreigners.
If I'm not mistaken, having separated ranking lists is prohibited by law.
Yeah, that's right. It would be a serious violation of a foreign citizen's right to do so. These rankings lists are drawn up according to an objective criteria such as income, job availability, the number of dependent family members, the presence of minors or disabled persons, and so on.
Once you have made a request for social service or financial aid, who or what shall we have to deal with?
The key figures of this type of service is a social worker who is responsible for most of the decisions regarding the organization of practical services.
Social worker, what do they do?
Well, in general, they identify cases in need of services to fix their situation, but they have a rather wide-ranging role. Through interviews and meetings with individuals or families in difficulty, the social worker develops a detailed analysis of their problems and draws up an assessment of their situation and an individualized intervention plan.
And so they are able to develop the needs of both Italian and foreign citizens into practical action.
Yes, since a social worker knows their territory well, which for us is often distant and unknown, and above all they know the possible resources they can use to fix problems we might encounter.
So it's worthwhile trusting your social worker.
Absolutely. I should underline that a social worker is also bound by professional secrecy, so you can speak freely with him or her. Only by fully knowing your situation are they able to develop a plan tailored to your needs.
Okay, we'll keep this in mind. What kind of cases does a social worker work with?
In principle, it's all those people who find themselves in a difficult situation, from families and children to the disabled and the elderly. If there are any problems communicating with foreigners, a social worker, as well as all council staff members, can ask help from people known as mediators.
What do mediators do?
A mediator is a professional considered a bridge capable of easing meetings between a public worker and a foreign citizen. It's an important role which should connect the social and cultural needs of new citizens with the reality of their new life in Italy.
So now we've concluded the part concerning the two officials, the social worker and the mediator. All that's left is to ask who carries out the services in the territory and who will new Italians with problems have to deal with.
The Council usually performs most of the services in collaboration with associations, non-profits, or those groups belonging to the social private sector, such as cooperatives.
Therefore, it's very likely that when you require help, you will have to deal with staff from associations or other organizations who may prove to be closer to you than the institution itself.
I see it the same way as you. The person who you will have to deal with in this case is a social and cultural expert, the employee of an association or cooperative who deals with the practicalities of your case inside the territory, from support to study and to job placement.
Well, we're almost at the end of today's episode. Would you like to add anything else, Adam?
I'd only like to repeat that all these social services provided by the councils and the state are much more effective when there is better collaboration between these institutions and the foreign citizens living in Italy. Help of this type can be really important for us foreigners, so you'll do well to trust in them.
I'm happy we can conclude this episode talking about trust, Adam. Our trust isn't just being able to find a chance of a good life here, but also trusting people and professionals we meet during our stay in Italy.
Yeah, indeed. I couldn't have said it better.
So here we can say goodbye. We've examined the world of work, healthcare, and social services in Italy in our third episode. In the next episode, we're going to look at schools.
Another fundamental chapter in Italian life for us and our children.
Thank you once again, Adam, for your availability and suggestions. They've all been extremely useful. See you next time.
Bye, Karen, and see you all soon.
Goodbye, everyone.